All right, so there's this trend which has been going around for the last few years or so, where American Christians have been making the claim or making the assertion that America is a Christian nation. And this shouldn't really bother me because I'm not American, but it kind of does simply for the fact that it's just not true. And I really do care about truth. And this is like one of the most blatantly untrue things that there are out there. So why this is happening, I think it's a desire for this to be true because Christianity or Christian groups, Muslims as well, Abrahamic, all of the Abrahamic religions are not really happy with simply believing what they believe. They want, for the most part, they want everyone else to believe or everyone else to fall in line with what they consider to be the correct way of life. And if you can make the case, or if you can convince people that this is in fact the case, then you can do that. You can, I don't know, enforce rules and laws that a Christian would want to enforce, like outlawing gay marriage or something. I don't know. So I get where the motivation for this is coming from, um, but yeah. So I am actually going to go into specifics about why this is not the case. But for now, I'm just generally going to talk about how to disprove this in like the most obvious, like duh kind of way. So in the last like 6 months or so, I've noticed that the people making this claim have moved away from the claim that like America is a Christian nation. And I think the reason that this has happened is because it's just not a defensible position. Like the arguments in support of America being a secular nation are pretty slam dunk, and the arguments in favor, and there is, it's not that there is nothing, there is some case to be made that America is a Christian nation, but they're much weaker by comparison. And I think what's happened is a lot of Christians have, or people who were making this claim, have realized this. And so now they've changed the position a little bit. They've moved away from that to something a little more general. Now, the what has been going around is people are making the claim that, oh, America was founded on Christian values. And that, because that's a much broader, more general kind of a statement. It's not really one that you can disprove as easily as the other. But I think for the most part, that still can be disproven. And actually, this is what is known as the Motte-Bailey fallacy. Except in this case, you can't really pin it on anybody specifically, because if you ever went to someone who was making that claim and says, well, before you were saying it's a Christian nation, they'll just be like, whoa, I never said that. That wasn't me. So even though in the broader sense, the whole movement is the Motte-Bailey fallacy, you can't really pin it on anybody specifically. So anyway, before I get on to the nitty gritty of breaking things down, let me just do it in a general kind of way. So when you think of the United States and you talk about the United States was founded on Christian values, let's put that to the side for a minute. And if I just said to you, what are American values? What is the quintessential American values? What does America stand for? And I think most people would come up with this, or something very similar to this, that American values are freedom of speech and democracy, and possibly just freedom or liberty, right? And those aren't Christian values, those are secular values, right? So in the simplest of ways, like without going nitty gritty deep into this, you can just on a surface level, you'd be like, America's not based on Christian values. In addition to this, if you were to go outside of America, anywhere around the world, it is commonly accepted that America is a secular nation. Like, this is common knowledge around the place, no matter where you go. In fact, not only is it common knowledge that America is a secular nation, it is taught in schools. This is how we learn about freedom of speech. Like, America is where it comes from. That's like the birthplace of secularism. This is where the whole thing comes from. And it's just to demonstrate this, I was talking to my wife about this before I actually decided to sit down and record it. And my wife is Chinese, so she speaks English as a second language. And she speaks English very well, but still, it's a second language. So she's got this app on her phone, which she can enter English words in that she doesn't know, and it'll give a definition in Chinese of what it means, and then will give an example sentence in English using the word itself. And she didn't know what secular meant. So I told her, but then she also looked it up on her phone. And the example sentence that was given on her app, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it said something like America is a secular nation. I was just like, well, there you go. Right. Like, this is commonly accepted fact around the world. And hopefully in most places within America as well. It's only seems to be the maybe not even all Christians within America, but it only seems to be Christian Americans who are pushing this narrative that America is a Christian nation. So, America is credited as being the first ever full secular nation in the world. Of course, the idea of secularism has existed long before the United States were founded. So the founding fathers didn't like make up this concept of their own. They were the first people to ever implement it into the law of a nation. It has existed as early as the Greek philosophers during the Roman Empire. Also, it had a big blow up during the Enlightenment in Europe after the French Revolution, or around the time of the French Revolution. And it wasn't put fully into practice until the United States came along. But in order to understand the full history of secularism and freedom of speech and where it comes from, we need to go back prior to the founding of the United States, back to England, back to King Henry VIII, who lived during the 1500s. And so back then, there was only one Christianity. And he had a wife, Catherine, and he was wanting to have an heir, a male heir for his throne. But the problem was his wife kept having miscarriages and giving birth to stillborns. And there was a son that was born that only lived a couple of weeks, but died after a couple of weeks. And he only had one living daughter with her that survived and lived on to adulthood. Her name was Mary, and she went on to become Bloody Mary, if you know who that was. And so, in his frustration and lack of patience, he wanted to divorce his wife, and so he could take on another woman who could bear him an heir to the throne. But because he was locked in place by the Pope at the time, the Catholic Church, there was no such thing as divorce then, or divorce was not allowed. And you could take on mistresses as a king, but they would be illegitimate. They would be bastard children. So King Henry VIII at the time, his solution to this was he was like, screw you all, I'm going to make my own church with blackjack and hookers. Actually, forget the blackjack. And so he did. He departed from the church, the Catholic Church, and he founded the Church of England, which later went on to be known as the Anglican Church, is what we know today. And then another branch off of that would be the Protestant Church, right? And so he was the first person to ever deviate from what was declared like the true word of Christianity, and he created his own church. And so that was a lot of people considered that to be blasphemy or treason, or like that your church is the fake church, it's not a legitimate church. But he enforced his church onto his people. Now, a lot of his people were not happy about this. They were Catholics, and they were forced to practice Catholicism in secret because the nation that they now lived in was an Anglican nation. It was always a Christian nation, but now it's a different kind of Christian nation. And if we fast forward to the year what was it, 1606, we had the gunpowder treason and plot, which involved Guy Fawkes. And anyone who knows this story knows that there were some conspirators who put a whole bunch of gunpowder under the Houses of Parliament with an attempt to blow it up. And they were all Catholic. And basically the motivation for this was, we are unhappy that we are not free to practice what we consider to be the true religion, or what we consider to be our religion. Like, we're not allowed to do it. It's illegal to do it, and that's not just, and that's not right. So it was like a rebellion against authority in order to practice freedom of religion. And this is why today Guy Fawkes, or the Guy Fawkes mask, is used as a symbol of freedom of speech, or a symbol of freedom, or like fighting back against the tyranny of a corrupt government, or like oppression, fighting back against oppression. It's used by lots of different groups, like Anonymous even used the Guy Fawkes mask as a symbol. He's used as a symbol which has been propped up. But yeah, so this was way back in 1606 when this happened, and 17. What was it? Actually, I should know. Is it 1776 when the country was founded? Anyway, in the later 1700s, when the founding fathers all gathered together to write into law this new nation that was about to be created, they were of various different flavors of Christianity, from ranging from Anglican to Protestant to Catholic, and I think even a couple of them would be considered deists, which is like, I guess it's just an old timey way of saying like you were agnostic. You believed there was a God, but you didn't believe specifically that it was a Christian God. You just believed in like a general creator of the universe. So they were all different flavors of Christianity, and rather than decide on one specific type of Christianity and force that on the nation that they were creating, and like creating another Christian nation, they instead decided to give this secularism thing a try. And so in the very first amendment you have freedom of speech, which by extension also includes freedom of expression and also freedom of religion, because they didn't want to have a potential another Guy Fawkes incident down the line. They wanted people to be peaceful and thrive and be able to freely practice their religion as they choose, but also to criticize their government, and give more power to the people to decide who rules over them rather than the rulers ruling over the people. That was the whole idea of it, and it did seem to work very well. And part of freedom of religion. So, in order to have true freedom of religion, you also need to have freedom from religion. Because, like, I'm not free to practice my religion if somebody else's religion is being forced on me. And so, in as a means to create true religious freedom, they had to stop this from happening. So they also created something known as separation of church and state, which means that the state in no way, shape, or form can adopt a particular doctrine and enforce it on the people. But it also means that the people cannot influence the state for religious reasons. That's where that whole idea came from. And as you would know it, this worked incredibly well. America thrived and it became what then was considered the greatest nation in the world, and some today still consider it to be the greatest nation of the world, because the people, the citizens of that country, had more freedom and more liberty than any other people of a nation anywhere else in the world for all of human history up to that time. And so a lot of the rest of the world saw this and they were like, damn, we want some of that. And so as a result, now have secular nations all around the world, all across Europe. Me, myself, I come from New Zealand. We are a secular nation and we adopted all of the values of America onto ourselves as well. Like we followed suit. So realistically, I should be thankful to America and the founding fathers, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have this freedom and this liberty that I have. But what about arguments that can be made in favor of America being a Christian nation? So, when it comes to this, as far as I know, if there are others, please down in the comments let me know. But as far as I know, there is only one argument that can be made in favor of this. And although that America is a secular nation where there is people freely practicing their religions, the majority of people who are freely practicing their religions within this secular nation are Christians. And, it depends on how you want to define it. Okay, so the majority of citizens within America are Christian. Does that make America a Christian nation? Well, some people will say yes. But I'll bring up a counterpoint to that. Based on that same logic, that would mean that China is a Buddhist nation. Like, how many of you would consider China to be a Buddhist nation? Because the majority of Chinese people are Buddhist. Like, some people would concede that just so they can get their way with claiming that America is a Christian nation. But really, like, when you look at the evidence comparing that says like America is a secular nation compared to the evidence that it's a Christian nation, they're really not comparable. And it's like, if you let ideas butt heads, the the Christian nation idea is not going to win out. And I think that's what a lot of people have realized with this. Like, we have let this play out and realize, oh man, yeah, like we can't actually win this position. And so they've moved to a more general position, which is like, oh, well, America was founded on Christian values. And like, you can't really discredit this one way or another because it is somewhat true. You could say it's founded on secular values, but you could also say it was founded on Christian values, and it's both are true to a certain extent. Like that's not really a false statement in any way. So let's look at this specifically. Oh, well, first of all, let's look at a couple of the claims regarding this position, which actually can be pinned down. And the first one is the idea that freedom of speech and freedom of religion is a Christian value. Like, that was a Christian value to start with, and it was thanks to Christianity that we have that concept in the first place. And people accredit this to the idea of free will. So God commands you certain things. There's certain things that God commands of you. But even though he commands of you to do these things, he also gives you free will to choose not to do it, if you will, or to choose to disobey if you please. And so that's where the idea comes from, right? And so, okay, that's fair enough. This idea of free will is not, it's been an interpretation from the Bible. It comes from like the idea of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And that's all fine and dandy, but then also in other parts of the Bible, like, I can't remember if it might be in the book of Exodus or somewhere in the Deuteronomy. Don't quote me on this, but I do remember reading this. During the selection of commandments, which are numerous, like 600 and something commandments, one of the a couple of the different commandments is, one is do not worship false idols, and do not take the Lord's name in vain, or do not blaspheme, right? And so these are the rules, but then also in addition to the rules or to these specific commandments, the required or the appropriate punishment which is supposed to be carried out by the society if you were to commit these crimes. So you've got free will to commit these crimes, right? God's not going to stop you. God's not going to force your hand and turn you into an automaton. But the society, it is their responsibility to stone you to death. That is your punishment for committing these crimes, right? And so when it really comes down to it, in a Christian nation, you don't, yeah, sure, you got free will, you've got the choice to worship whoever you want, but then if you don't worship the Christian God, if it was in fact a Christian nation, according to Scripture itself and the laws of the Bible, that's the kind of punishment that would be ensued. So you've always got this threat of violence or this threat of death over your head to keep you in line. Similar to how Islam works. Like, if you were to leave the religion of Islam, the society that you live in, if it was in fact a Muslim society, which there are many, a Muslim nation, the punishment for that is death. And they do carry this out around the world in many Muslim nations. So that one there, I think, is a little bit like, is it really? And also, like, freedom of speech, just have a look at the history of all Christian nations that have existed throughout history, because there aren't actually currently any true Christian nations, but they were prior to America being a thing. As some of you may have heard or may be aware of, the Spanish Inquisition, right? So there were inquisitions happening everywhere within Christian nations. You weren't just allowed to not believe in Christianity, you were supposed to believe in a specific type of Christianity. If you didn't fall into the line, the inquisitors were going to come around and put you in line. And the Spanish Inquisition is the most famous Inquisition, but there were many, many inquisitions, and every Christian nation that has ever existed had inquisitors, and that was their job in order to keep people in line with Christianity. Like, you didn't have the option of worshipping another god or being another religious figure within a Christian nation. So anyone who's trying to make that claim is, I think they're just being dishonest about what's going on, or they're just ignorant. They don't know, like, the history of actual Christian nations that have existed throughout history. Right, so there's that. And lastly, and this is the bit that I think is very vague and very general, is the idea that, yes, everybody, at least, like, first of all, if we put aside the fact that the Native Americans were already there and had already been there for a very long time, but all of the European settlers, the majority of which came from England or Great Britain, and others that came from other parts of Europe, they did in fact come from Christian nations. So England at the time was a Christian nation. Other parts of Spain, France were all Christian nations. And so, well, not, well, some parts of Europe were going through a bit of a revolution. So, but for the most part, yes, the majority of people that were coming over did come from Christian nations, and even if they didn't come from a Christian nation, the majority of them were Christians. And so, as you can imagine, these people would have brought their Christian values over with them when they settled. So, yeah, it's not like they don't have a leg to stand on in this case. They definitely do. Um, and then the last part of it is because there are certain values within American society, like for example, do not steal, do not kill, do not. There's a lot of do nots, right? But for the most part, there's actually a lot of overlap between secular values and Christian values. Like the Golden Rule. That's not. I mean, yes, that is a Christian value, and you can claim it as a Christian value, but that's also a secular value. In fact, do not kill, do not steal, treat people with respect, or the Golden Rule, can be found in pretty much all cultures all around the world, even in places prior to Christianity or in places that have never heard of Christianity. So, yeah, that pretty much sums up everything there is to know about this case. Is America a secular nation? Of course. Is it a Christian nation? Definitely not. Is America founded on Christian values? Yeah, okay, sure. There's a case to be made about that. You can't deny it. Um, if I have missed anything, and I feel like I probably have, please update us down in the comments below. And if it's something really good, I'll be sure to pin it. But other than that, everybody, stay honest, and I'll see you in the next one.